really excited to introduce all of the amazingness for this panel this evening. We got together as a group to chat a little bit about the topics that we want to talk about. And it really was around the season, pride, authenticity, how to show up in the workplace, how to navigate through organizations, whether equitable or inequitable. And also lastly, the topic around just celebrating our joy and celebrating ourselves and our health and mental well-being within the workplace. And so one topic that we love to start off this space with is just learning about everyone here and your story into the design and creative industry. And so the further question is just, how did you even get into this industry and space? What piqued your interest? If you've pivoted, what made you even want to pivot and to do the work that you're doing today? And so with that, why don't we have Nikita? You want to start off?
Sure. So before transitioning into UX design, I was an educator. So I taught middle school and high school and adults English for about 7 to 8 years. And during that time, I had a nonlinear type of journey into UX because every 3 years, it seemed like I was leaving the education field to go work in tech. And just nothing really ever panned out the way that I wanted. Like I did a stint at Capitol Records. They was crazy as hell. And a few other ed tech companies. And I'm just like, no, thank you. So during the onset of the pandemic, a lot of people really reflected on their current situation and where they wanted to be in the future. And I knew I always wanted to be in tech, but I felt that I wasn't able to be successful because I didn't really learn a skill that was really going to be able to take me to where I needed to be. So I did some research and I found something called instructional design, but it was too closely aligned with education. And I knew I completely wanted to remove myself from education. So I stumbled upon UX design, did some thorough research, and I realized that this really spoke to me. I'm someone who really loves speaking to users. A lot of people, designers, tend not to really, the designers that I know, the research phase is really not that's not the one they like the most. I love it. So I was like, oh, I would really want to do more of this. And so I found a boot camp, completed it within a year, went into career services, and I found my job at Ally as a UX designer within 3 months. So that's pretty much my story into this particular field.
That is awesome. And quite a shift during the pandemic, right? That is awesome. And with that, also Treavor, do you want to do a quick story?
Yeah, sure. Definitely. So yeah, also a nonlinear transition into, actually it wasn't so much a transition, it was kind of like a falling into UX. I've been working as a designer in the industry as for like 20 years, or almost 20 years. It'll be 20 in 2024. Yes. And I was always a creative person, but also very logical minded. And so I was always hanging out online when I was a teenager. And so one way that I found solace growing up in rural Texas was through the internet. And I was just journaling on this random site. I'll just mention it. It doesn't exist anymore, but Journal Space. And I would create blog themes for people, for bloggers. And so that led me to learning HTML, CSS, creating my own hacky images or graphics on whatever random free software that existed at the time. And Then I went off to college, and that's where I kind of, just like many people, grew into myself. I begged my way into my first web design gig on campus, working for the rec center there and creating their website. And then I decided that I wanted to actually, study design. And so fast forward, I graduated not with a design degree, but with a writing degree, hence the book that I just posted in the chat. But my first gig outside of working on campus was a web design gig. So at the time, UX was not a household name, wasn't really talked about much. This was like 2010. And it became a buzzword, and I was like, oh, I do that. So I started calling myself a UX designer, getting UX design gigs, and then found myself kind of brushing up against, at the time, the discussion of like UX versus UI, which one are you? And I found myself being like, I'm both. And then, growing up in Texas, we didn't have terms like product designer. And once I figured out what those were, I was like, oh, I do that. So which encompasses UX and UI. So there you go. And that's how I'm here. Eventually I found design systems. And so that's my niche within product design that I really love. So I'm very grateful to have come upon it. So that's me.
You had me surprised. I thought you were going to say either LiveJournal or Zanga.
Competitors. There were competitors. That was more the obscure side.
Awesome. That's awesome. And gonna hop it over to Micah. You want to do a quick little story time?
Yeah, sure. So like the folks on the panel with me, I think I came from different sort of trajectory. I think it makes sense to go back a little bit further. I am a former foster youth, former incarcerated youth, and I'm also a second generation Mexican American. And I was incarcerated when I was younger, and I learned how to letter with big pens in juvenile hall. And I got really good at lettering, and I thought I would be a tattoo artist for a very long time. Fast forward many, many years, as a former foster youth, I didn't necessarily graduate college high school with a high school diploma. I got a CHESP, which is the California High School Proficiency Exam. It's an exit exam. And then I worked wage jobs, thinking maybe one day I'd be a tattooer for many years. I got fired and I was like, wow, this is fucking rock bottom. I should probably see if I could go to school. Like, what is it that I want to do, right? And someone said, you really like to illustrate. Like, maybe you can turn that into a career. Have you ever heard of design? Started looking into it. Started going to City College, studying graphic design. Ended up going to CCA with a full ride because my broke ass wasn't going to be able to afford it. Got a degree in graphic design, and that was right at the beginning of interaction design. Like I think the budding, that was 2010s and a little bit beyond that, interaction field, product design field. In hindsight, I wish that I had studied more on the product side than I did on the brand side, but I came out of college, got a fellowship at Chronicle Books as a book designer, really like sort of paper, like tangible design. And I really loved that. I got my first job at Fuse Project with Eve Bahar as a brand designer and got to work on some really incredible stuff. And then I met Steven working at a different spot. And that's where I got my feet wet for the first time on product. My first product I think that I worked on was the Sephora virtual artist app. And that was super fun. And I realized that I totally loved it. And I wanted to pivot completely away from the more brand design or the more, what I think is like kind of skimmed surfaces like UI and right into products. I was most recently at Altertles as the principal product designer. And I was very lucky to join that team working on an app that helped people in the workplace report harassment and discrimination anonymously. And then just before I left, I just wrapped up an MVP for a product that helps students find lower cost course equivalents offered at community colleges near them in order to reduce the cost of a four-year degree by 40%. I tend to love products that have some kind of intersectional or social impact sort of need. That I love impact projects. If nonprofit work could make money and I could just serve nonprofits, I would be doing that probably for the rest of my life. Yeah, so that's my story in a nutshell.
Yeah, and so this takes us to the first topic of this evening, which is on the topic of authenticity. And so as we were chatting earlier, lots of different topics and thoughts coming up for folks. But just want to start with the open question, just in terms of authenticity and maybe around how do you personally show up authentically within your workplace? And what does that mean for you?
Okay, I was gonna jump in there, the other two didn't. So yeah, I think I'm not sure if it was like around 2020 or no, it was definitely not 2020. I think it might have been, actually it was 2020, early 2020, when I just decided that I'm gonna own all of my identity. You know, like I mentioned, I've been in the industry for 20 years where when I was coming up, and I probably mentioned this in like my panel discussion with UX Come Up too, but I was in a time when, you know, this was before we had marriage rights, before, and coming up in Texas where discrimination was cool. My first job out of college, I was fired for being gay. So, you know, with that situation, like the company fought me on not disability, but unemployment rights. And, you know, I went through arbitration, and ironically, the state of Texas favored me. So I won my unemployment, and I used it to travel around the world. But, you know, I won. And I think that, you know, emboldened me to, I think that validated me to being what I already felt, which was to be 100% myself as much as possible, even if it meant harm. And I've definitely had my fair share of being professionally beaten up in the corporate space, corporate and tech space, not only being a queer person, but a Black queer person. So I've been fired or bullied out of a job for being Black, or, you know, participating in ERGs, supporting them, being more vocal, doing my job correctly. And every step of the way, I was 100% myself. And at the end of the day, like, I don't have any regrets on how I did my job, because I did it the right way. And I was also myself. So I now, on my resume, on my website, on anything, I always lead with, my name is Treavor Wagoner. My pronouns are he, him. I'm a Black queer designer. There you go. That's me in a nutshell. So always be authentically yourself. It has worked out for me. Definitely had some bumps and bruises, but in this industry, and honestly any industry where you're trying to be authentic, you're going to get pushed around. It's just part of it.
I love that. Just learning to be unapologetically yourself and really putting forth. And one, I think it's very unfortunate that you have to go through all of that legal proceeding to just stand up for yourself. But two, I'm glad that you got through it and the positive side, and have been able to use that to empower and really take back the time back that they inflicted upon you. And as a part of also showing up authentically, I want to hop over to Nikita on your LinkedIn at the very top. You're also very unapologetically and bold as well. And so, yeah, I just want to create space and just ask you, how do you show up authentically, and what does that mean for you?
So ever since I was younger, I always understood that I was different, and other people around me understood that as well. And I could not hide it. So it was just kind of like out there. And I had to embrace that at a very young age, that I was extremely effeminate. I had a high-pitched voice, just all these different things. And I truly embraced that. And I did not care what anybody around me had to think about it. Now, I was fortunate that people around me really embraced me. Of course, there were some individuals who didn't, but as far as like causing any physical harm, things of that nature, that was never really a part of my story. And when I was the male version of myself, I was very just kind of going through the motions, doing what I was doing. I don't know. I was listening to Treavor and I was like, I don't know how I made it as a teacher because I was always being told on. I remember I slapped my hip one time when I was trying to get my students' attention, and they went back and told their parents that Mr. Washington slapped his butt. And it like caused such this uproar of, well, you're sexualizing and all that type of stuff. And I was like, girl, please. So it really bothered me. And when I started my transition last year in March, I was like, look, I am 33 years old. I don't give a hot damn what anybody has to say about me truly being my authentic self. So I really embraced that. And when I got my job, it wasn't until maybe a month or so where I really started to put myself more out there and make myself more visible. So like what Stephen was referring to, when you go to my LinkedIn, you'll see as my banner is Black, trans, and a designer. I want people to know that I am a trans woman because that is a part of my identity. I don't utilize that as a way to get or seek attention, you know, or please work with me only because I'm trans. No, it's because I do want to be visible because there are so many other trans individuals, especially Black and brown trans folk, who do not see themselves in these particular types of positions. A recent study that was conducted in 2020 found that there was an unemployment rate of 26% for Black and brown trans folk. And I think that was double just overall trans individuals. So it's really important for me to be visible because so many trans people have reached out to me via LinkedIn just saying thank you and how did you do it? And we're glad that we know that we can achieve this feat. And that's really important to me, to just really put myself out there and be authentic, because you're gonna get what you're gonna get. And if you don't want it, I can leave. So yeah.
Yes, I think the last part was very powerful. It's listening, hearing, going with the flow, where people are embracing you. And I think it's just, yeah, it's, people still have a lot of work to do to be able to open their eyes, hearts, and souls to sometimes the identities we bring to the table. And also want to create space for Micah. As for you, what does authenticity mean for you? And how do you show up for yourself?
Yeah, I mean, I think I could echo Nikita's experience as someone in the trans masculine experience that was never able to hide my queerness. It's one of those things that I also put on my LinkedIn. It's not something that I'm able to take off in any space that I operate, whether it's as a partner, a parent, a colleague, a designer. I feel like my identity is, you know, something that I can't take off like a shirt. I think there was one point in time where I was able to maybe be a little bit more under the radar because I was scared. And through my transition at work, I think we had this conversation, you know, last week about what that looked like, and doing gender confirming surgeries and going to work with my chest still stapled closed 5 days after getting off an operating table because I was too scared to say it. And then realizing, like, I feel like I was gifted power by the people that I could see in visibility, right? And it's not just the people that you think you know are queer in queer space, but also those people that might not have come to terms with identities. How do you, I think I like to use the term snowplow, like you and your identity, you're moving things out of the way so the people behind you aren't having to interact with the same kind of tensions, hostilities, like toxic environments, etc. So just using that visibility as a platform or a microphone to kind of move things out of the way for other people has been really important to me. So I'm very, very out in my workspaces and have been probably for the last, I'd say like 6 or 7 years, definitely since Hero. And that has gotten me into a lot of trouble too. There's definitely the squeaky wheel syndrome that happens when you're in queer identity, but also in any other kind of marginalized identity, whether that's a racial identity or difference in ability, learning abilities, cognitive abilities, etc. And so I think it's really important to recognize and notice that you need to make space for a lot of different intersectional identities. Queerness is just one of the ones that I think people are more open to listening to in order to make space for and pass the mic to the left to those people that aren't sort of being centered, or dare I say like outright excluded. I think particularly conversations around accessibility, etc. So yeah, that's how I show up as my authentic self. A little bit of a bull in a china shop, as they say, but I think it's really important work. So yeah.
Yeah, there's a quick question. Squeaky wheel syndrome. What does that mean?
Yeah, so there's the saying, the squeaky wheel gets the oil. That is that is a squeaky wheel. I think in the tech jargon landscape means that you're squeaking, you're raising red flags, you are speaking to management, you are reporting things that don't feel right, you are kind of demanding accountability from your leadership team. So that's what we would call squeaky wheel. And the squeaky wheel syndrome is like, wow, this person doth protest too much, you know, oh, you're saying too much. It might be because you're the only, right? None of us want to be the only of some kind of identity in the workplace. And oftentimes we aren't, but I think particularly working with white people, you get to be the only because you're not going to get a lot of allyship speaking it behind you. So unfortunately, the labor goes on to a lot of POC or a lot of queer folks, regardless of their other marginalized identity. So squeaky wheel syndrome as being like, oh, we have identified you as the squeaking wheel and we're going to treat you slightly differently. It's differential treatment. So that's a real thing that comes up in workplaces, I think, particularly with white folks, and particularly cis white folks. Oh, and able-bodied folks, just kind of across the board. So.
Yep. Treavor, you want to add on to that?
No, I just, yeah, I mean, you're basically putting a term to some of my experience, you know, being in tech as the only Black person in the room, sometimes up until lately, the only queer person in the room. So yeah, and then also just can't not shut my mouth when I see shit that is not going right. I just be like, no, you're not doing it right. Yeah, it's the Virgo Beyonce syndrome. Add a term there. Not an actual syndrome. But yeah, whenever I see like someone not in the room that should be in the room, I call it out. And I think, you know, people appease me, you know, when I try to make things equitable or right. But I think, you know, when I say it maybe too much or too often, it does put a target on my back. So, and I know that now, being in the industry for a while, and I just go with it. I'm just like, you know, after I say like maybe the 5th thing, I'm just like, okay, let's see how long it's gonna put me out of here. Yeah, I'm fine with it.
I feel like, Treavor, I'm not fine with it. I want to make spaces for us to be bringing these kinds of things up and not having to move on. Like we shouldn't have to leave because other people are uncomfortable. I will just say I was in very recently a meeting with someone and talking to them about trying to hold a leadership team accountable for lack of diversity. And that person told me, I can tell you're going to be really challenging to me, and started offering to connect me to other teams outside of teams that I was working on. So like, when I say like you make people uncomfortable and they want you to move off the team, that's not the answer. The answer is accountability. That's like bilateral. It's directional. It's, you know, making space for us and bringing more folks with identities like ours sort of to the table.
Yeah.
And also the lack of consent there, right? You didn't ask for that. And so people offering these solutions that we didn't ask for, it's like, no, we wanted that. Yeah. I was just gonna say Trevor, Virgo. I feel like I learn a lot about people with horoscopes. Yes.
You
Virgos are
see all these lists in
perfect.
the background?
Yeah. But I think a lot of us resonate with that, right? Where it feels like you have to be the squeaky wheel just to almost breathe within the workplace and get yourself heard. And to your point, Trevor, it puts such a big target on your back. And I think sometimes the way that Geminis represent. I mean, if everyone just wants to drop your horoscopes too, we'll learn so much more about each other. I'm an Aries.
Taurus, can we tell?
Taurus. Nikita, you're Gemini. Yeah, I love it. But it's also this theory that we, as part of standing up for our work, right? We have to put ourselves out there on the front lines. And unfortunately, what ends up happening is when we come head to head with a lot of inequitable forces, inequitable leaders, inequitable systems, we end up getting chops. We end up getting reprimanded. We end up getting slapped on the hand and whatever else happens. And so I think what's really amazing also is just shifting kind of that narrative. And I just wanted to also kind of put this question back to you all as a follow-up question is around shifting the narrative, right? Of just how do you work within these systems that were frankly not meant for us to start off with, right? Yeah, Nikita.
Yeah, I was just going to say quickly that I think one way in which you really work within these systems, of course, challenge them, but also it's unfortunate to say this, but sometimes they just really have to see that we can do it and understand that, oh, she's a human too, even though she's of trans experience and even though she's Black and she's this and all of that. And I think that when people, especially as UX designers, we understand the importance of empathy. When we do have empathy with each other, we do understand that at the end of the day, we all go through these particular types of feelings, emotions, and we all deserve a seat at the table. Now, that does not mean that if someone is doing you wrong, that you just simply let it go. No, you definitely challenge them and you go to the necessary individual to get them reprimanded if that is the case. Because one thing that you definitely should not have to deal with at your job or anywhere in life is being uncomfortable for being your authentic self. Everybody else that you work with who is quote unquote, according to them, normal, can be their authentic self. And they don't have to worry about being reprimanded for loving who they love, their gender expression, things of that nature. And we shouldn't have to feel that way either.
Nikita, I wanted to follow up with something that you had actually just previously said that resonated with me, and that was about putting yourself out there so the people that are seeing that already understand and respect and sort of embrace your authentic self. And I want to plus one that and say that I feel like is really important, because why waste time on people who are going to make you do a lot of labor in order to understand you? And I just thought it was really beautifully said. And like, yeah, I just wanted to plus one that and use that as also to validate some of the things that you were just saying, particularly around being authentic and making sure that people know who you are. But I think there's something to also not settling for people that will make you do immense labor in order to understand who you are. So something about being very upfront about who you are is that you don't have to interface with that right away. If someone's interacting with you or coming to you, that's already an understood, it's normalized, it's agreed upon. It's sort of like, you know, off the table, and then you can interface as yourself as a UX designer or as yourself as a product designer. And I just thought that was really lovely the way that you had said that.
Yeah, and I just want to add one additional thing, because I know that we did speak about this during our Friday call, that with what Treavor was saying, that is on his resume, LinkedIn, when he speaks to recruiters, people, things of that nature. And then what is on my LinkedIn I wanted it to be known, to be out there, that this is what you are going to get. And I was nervous in the beginning when I did it, please know that, because my manager follows me. And when I hit post, I knew that he was going to see it. And I did not want him to treat me any differently than my colleagues simply because of a post that I posted on LinkedIn, simply giving of myself so that others can really see me. And moving forward, it did not keep anyone, from my understanding, from reaching out to me. I still have people, in my DMs, recruiters, things of that nature, wanting to speak to me. And I just wanted to say that because I think that some of us, myself included when I did it, was really nervous about what is going to happen? What is going to be the reaction once I post this and people see it? Are people going to shun me? Am I going to have a drop in connections? People who knew the old me, are they then going to be like, oh, no, we're not dealing with you anymore? And, it may happen, but don't necessarily be afraid to let your true colors show simply because you're afraid that people are not going to accept you. And that's just something that we're all going to have to deal with at our own time, but just know that when you're ready, just go full steam ahead.
I'm going to plus one that. I think that, even though you plus one me, I'm going to plus one you back. When I lead with my identity fully, this is a happy accident, but it saves me from coming out, which, I was listening to, I forgot who it was, but they were saying that they have to come out everywhere they go. And I just thought to myself, and I was like, do I have to do that? And I'm like, no, I don't, because I refuse. I'm like, this is who you are. This is who I am. This is what you're going to get. And I think that's, also what you were saying, Nikita, when recruiters reach out to me and they're like, they see Black queer designer in my bio, some of them have applauded me and said, thank you for being, I guess, brave or forthcoming with your identity. I'm going to do the same going forward. And so it's a wave. Whenever we show up as ourselves, it's a wave. It allows other people to also be authentic and present themselves. Yeah. So even though we're the leaders and we start the wave, it's scary, as Stephen just mentioned. Others will join us. So, and then we start a community, and it becomes all love, all family. Not to get too hippie, but yeah.
Be hippie. It's beautiful to embrace yourself, but it's just so crazy that we still have to come out, right, as a part of all of our identity all the time, and how some people from the dominant culture feel as though they have the right to inquire or to know some of these things sometimes. And so let's maybe pivot this a little bit into maybe the flip side of when our identities get over-indexed, when they get tokenized, right? And just like invisible raise of hands, like how many of you have, right, like felt tokenized within the workplace or within the spaces you've taken space of? And I just wanted to open up the question for our group is, one, if you've had experiences being tokenized in the past, whether it's within the workplace, whether it's with your identity. Yeah. I see a little head nodding. Micah, you want to start us off?
I was just reading some of these chats. So it's like Willie was posting something about minorities having to do so much labor already. And then Jamie was saying they have definitely been tokenized as well. I think there's this fine line, and we're kind of like dancing around it, because it's both like, these are the things that we want, and also don't you dare tokenize me. Like, respect who I am and don't make me do the labor because I'm the only person. That's what's up for me when thinking about this question, is like, we have employee run groups. There's often D&I practices or some kind of initiative And in my experience, I've seen a lot, especially I think around Pride or Juneteenth, particularly around Juneteenth, is that Black colleagues are forced to do the labor for white folks. But also there's the flip side of that is like, Treavor, I think, or maybe it was Nikita that was like, I don't want to hear a white person talk to me about Juneteenth, right? So like, how do we support initiatives internally where recognizing like, of course, we wouldn't want to be like hearing white people go on and on or sort of like take the mic from Black folks. But on the other hand, like, how do we support that labor with compensation, with actual like resourcing or help? And then around Pride too, I think every one of us has probably been asked to be part of a Pride initiative. I definitely know that you yourself, Stephen, have asked me to be part of Pride initiatives. And it's like, of course, we band together in workplaces, right? We're family and we're community. But when you look around, what are we doing? We're making the company look really great with some D&I initiatives, but how do they support us in that labor? And often it goes uncompensated, or it's not something that we get to sort of talk about outside of the workplace. So I will pass the mic and ask also Treavor and Nikita, how's that been for you? That's my experience.
I was just thinking about when Stephen posed the question, I was thinking about when I was tokenized. I'm usually the only Black person in the room. My current company that I work at, I'm actually in the virtual room with other Black designers, which is unheard of in my experience.
Thanks for sharing. How about you, Nikita?
In my current role, no. As a trans woman, no. But definitely when I identified as a gay male, yes, especially in education. So there was like two sides of the coin. We either wanted you to be yourself or we didn't want you to be yourself. And it was kind of confusing a lot of the times because I always had to be the face or one of the faces, because it was like, we got a Black person and he's an effeminate gay male. So we're gonna put him out there so that people can see, look, we got a little bit of diversity. We hired people who can really resonate with these kids and things of that nature. So Nikita, we need for you to go out there and do your thing and let the people know that we love you and all that type of stuff. And I'm just like, really? It was really infuriating a lot of the time because I just wanted to go under the radar. I just wanted to live my life, teach my kids, instill the knowledge that I wanted to instill in them, and just go on about my business. Now, I have been asked to speak at a lot of events, over the past couple of months, but they have been, the people who have reached out to me have been within my community. So I know that they're coming with the right intent, for the most part. And I definitely do not have a problem in speaking, being more visible, things of that nature. I'm just always leery because I do want cisgender heterosexual individuals to know that one, we exist. We are here to stay. We are not going anywhere, no matter what they try to do. We are going to be visible. We're going to be loud and proud, and we are going to show that we are worthy to be in any position, job, so on and so forth that we choose to go after. But it's also exhausting. But this goes back to what Micah was stating when we were all on the call on Friday, because I don't want no white person talking to me about Juneteenth. No. So but at the same time, us as Black folks, us as the LGBTQ plus community, we tired. So it's hard, y'all. And that's all I got to say. It's hard.
Y'all, I mean, I've been trying to hold my tongue on a certain situation because I've had a rough day today. But it's just really crazy to me that, throw some shade, it's just gonna happen. That, you have a white gay leader speaking on Juneteenth in a video the day before you let one of the very few Black members of your team go, especially one who's providing a lot of value to your team. So it's really crazy to me that you are a white person speaking on Juneteenth.
You know, don't trademark Juneteenth, Walmart. I think we talked a lot about that.
We did talk a lot about that.
It goes without saying. Corporate greed and white people.
What are you gonna say, Nikita? It's just so much to unpack there. It's just, why is this white person taking up space on Juneteenth? It's just
so embarrassing.
It's really embarrassing.
Shrink.
All of the shade.
All the shade. And I just want to touch on like some of the comments that have been coming up, but to, just I'm feeling also a collective exhaustion, right? That we all have to do so much of this labor. And it just seems like when Pride rolls around, everyone's just like, who's queer? Who's trans? Who's gay? Who's lesbian? Like, stand up, do this work, And it's just so exhausting sometimes to have to be put in the position to first not have all the rights afforded, but also not able to just, like Nikita, you mentioned, just like sit back and do the work, right? I'm not going to speak on behalf of other experiences of folks I've chatted with, but, I've heard countless time and time again that there are some people who just really don't have the energy to do extra. And especially as we think about our white counterparts and how they're paid the same as us, but then all the BIPOC folks, queer folks are all in every single ERG doing the most, right? To not just create space for ourselves, but for other people within our community and still paid the same, We're not paid extra for all of this labor. And also, it seems like there's a comment also when people ask us, they want more of us. And when we show up, being asked to tone ourselves down a bit. Yeah. And it's just this concept, and Keith writes, they want the idea of you, but don't want you. I feel like really resonates. Yeah.
They want the idea of you, but they don't want to feel bad about themselves, is what I would say. It's not really even about you. It's about the accountability that you're requesting, that you're requiring in order for them to have you and your practice and your talent near them or around them, but also working within their team. I just want to say that it's not I have been through so many situations where, the toned down conversation or the we love how brave you are, but like, wow, there's a lot of accountability you're asking for. And I just want to say, for anyone that has ever struggled with that, and I definitely have struggled with that for like decades now, is that it's not about you. And then like +2 again to what Nikita said, it's like, if you can and have the space within your life to be upfront about who you are, then finding people that you don't have to fight with about that are already okay with you is important.
And I just want to also add a couple of things to what Micah was stating as a +1. I have been told so many times throughout my life to tone it down. You're just a little too much. You're too effeminate, things of that nature. And that really got to me a lot of the times, because I was like, I'm not putting on an act or a show or anything. I'm just simply being myself. So a lot of the things that you're noticing are things that I don't even notice because I'm just doing it. It's just me. And I've always done this. I've always been very, I've always just exaggerated a lot. I've always been one to kind of give facial expressions and things of that nature. That's just been me. So part of the reason why I wanted to get into tech, and I'm kind of curious about Treavor and Micah about this, and even you, Stephen, part of the reason why I wanted to get into tech is because when I was working in ed tech, and I would see some of the true tech people, I would say, they were able to be themselves from what I saw from afar. They were able to dress a particular way. They were able to let themselves be known. And I was like, I need to get into tech so I can do that. But of course, now that I've been in tech, I am noticing that there is still that gatekeeping about, well, yeah, but only to a certain extent. Because even when I'm in meetings and I'm kind of letting some of my authentic self out, the way in which I'm speaking to all of you, it's kind of like if you all were in the call, you would get it. But the other people in the call, they're like, really? You know, or can you tone it down a little bit? So I just wanted to mention that because I do understand what it feels like to be told on a consistent basis, tone it down, we don't need all of that, but yet you want me to do X, Y, and Z, you want to put me out there to be seen, and you want me to be myself, but when it comes to certain situations, no, don't give us too much. So it's really confusing and stupid.
When you saw those people in tech that were being themselves, what did they look like in terms of skin color?
You got me there because they wasn't looking like me. So yeah, they didn't look like me.
Yeah, so there you go. I remember Micah, the last Micah and I have been in a panel together. I would do this thing where I would look at the other Black people that work in this company to see how they move, how they interact, things like that. And one good test, I'm probably telling too much, but whatever, is to try to talk to a Black person in a public setting, like around in a common area. And I remember in the kitchen, I was trying to go up to this woman who was Black, and I said hi, and she had her food in her plate, and she just kind of like gave me the look like, no, no, and that's a pretty common thing. So that let me know that, oh, this is not a safe space for me, being a Black person. Now, being a queer person in that setting at that particular job was fine. Because what I found was so it's so odd to have like half of me being accepted, but the other half not. That is, both of them are typically not accepted in any capacity in Texas in particular. But like my queerness was celebrated, but my Blackness was shunned. So yeah, but Black and queer is one thing for me, is one experience. So it was an odd experience. So when you're Black and you're queer, and you live in the South in particular, and it's probably the case in other areas of the country, you do have that experience where half of you that is typically not accepted is celebrated, and then the other half is, they want to boot it out of you. So yeah. So
I love that advice though, Treavor, is just, talking with people, talking with community and seeing how they react. What I will say, yeah. And what I will say this is identities are so complex, and it's just one part of the queer identity that it has a propensity of proximity to whiteness that it has, that also gives it power beyond Blackness, right? Like Blackness has no propensity to whiteness in the white dominant culture. And so it's just one of those unfortunate things where what we experience, especially with these identities and so many varying levels of privilege, is also due to all of the intersectional identities that they encompass too. Yeah, I think that was a lot of great advice, and also wanted to create space for Micah with the work that you had done previously in terms of also understanding tokenism, and also tokenism that might not be right and that people can actually take action on. Wanted to ask if you could share a little bit of insights that came out of your previous project. If people are experiencing tokenism, maybe what steps can they take?
Yeah, I think we had a little bit of a conversation around what tokenism really means in the workplace. And the previous project that you're speaking to is the SPOT, the anti-harassment and discrimination. And I think the thing that we fail to realize is the rights that we have in different areas of the workplace, and how tokenism is a form of harassment and discrimination. So if you're being asked to do something because of an intersectional identity, whether that is you are a woman, or whether that is you are a Black person, or whether that is you are a queer person, a non-binary person, a trans person, if you're being tokenized, especially without your consent in the workplace, you have a lot of rights there. I think it's contingent on the way that it makes you feel. If it in any way turns your workplace into a hostile environment or a toxic environment, my suggestions to folks is to document the shit out of that. Especially if you're a Virgo. It's like, Trevor, you do a great job if that was happening, and God forbid you ever need that. But my advice would be to document the situation and then send some written communication with HR and also document those things, but also look for resources. If you think it's been particularly heinous or pervasive, contacting employment lawyers in your area. I would recommend people that are themselves QTBIPOC. Yeah, I will say, lastly, like, thank you for holding space for me and this experience, but I definitely want to make sure that Treavor and Nikita get a lot of space here, because what we're talking about, I think, is more pervasive for Black people. I think my proximity to whiteness as someone that is a light-skinned Mexican person means that I get to fly under the radar. And I'll give you an anecdotal story. Stephen was asking us for headshots and was about to use my headshot off LinkedIn. And then he was like, "Ooh, I'm so glad, that definitely doesn't show off your best side." And I was like, yeah, if I could write a book in the future, I would write it as when I was a white man. As someone that is non-binary, but trans-masculine and then non-binary, I tried to operate in spaces, and I think particularly in San Francisco's tech culture, where the tech bros and the lumberjack chic and flying under the radar in that way made me fly under the radar in a way that was unseen to me. I was comfortable at that time because it meant that I was a little bit more stealth, and it was something that wasn't center stage for me, but that happened. And so I feel like I must acknowledge the privilege that I have, being able to take off a lot of identities and kind of just hide behind a really shitty beard and kind of sink into the background. I think I have the ability to do that as a light-skinned Latina person. A lot of people are confused about what my racial identity is. So I just want to acknowledge that I have a lot of privilege in that, and that has gotten me, I think, into safe spaces very quickly, whereas I feel definitely Treavor and Nikita are not able to take off the racial identity at the very least, but also the queer identity. So just want to give more space to you and pass the mic back.
Thank you for acknowledging that. And honestly, as a cis male, I was going to just pass the mic to you and Nikita, because trans people are well, I'm not gonna I was gonna play who's been disrespected most, but yeah, it's not fair what's happening to trans people, or what has been happening to trans people. So yeah, we're all here. I guess we can all share the mic together. But thank you very much for acknowledging that.
And that's not a requirement that anyone needs to catch the mic that I'm tossing. I just want to provide more space for folks if they feel like talking about it, for sure. And
And I would just plus one up, like Mike had mentioned, some of the legal resources. Legal fees can also be covered by nonprofit organizations too. And so I think that's one thing that a lot of people just scare, especially our communities, into, is just the cost of just really standing up for yourself. And oftentimes we can just pitch some of our cases with lawyers and just see the reaction. And there are lawyers who actually provide resources or just cover it. And that even in certain instances, if you don't, win the case that their firm or their organization will cover the costs. And so have been really adamant, at least myself, in sharing that with our community members as a resource.
I'll add that oftentimes consultations are free to talk to lawyers if you feel like you've been discriminated in any way. They're almost 100% free, and then they'll be able to evaluate cases. But before that, I'll share a link in the chat. But if you want to use a free, completely anonymous tool to record or report harassment and discrimination in your workplace, I definitely would recommend using the product that I helped build called Spot. The URL is talktospot.com. It's just a quick chat bot that acts as a third party between you and your business, so they never have to know your identity. You can make a report and keep information that would identify you to yourself if you'd like, but it also sends you a timestamped document that you could use if you needed to litigate. I'll type that out here in the chat. But if y'all are, even if you don't want to talk to something like a chatbot around an experience, even keeping a text edit document or emailing yourself about an incident that's happened is usually enough.
Thank you, Micah. And Aria mentioned also being bisexual, cis Black woman, not often visibly queer, but always Black, even though the colorist favors as someone who is light-skinned. Absolutely, colorism. Yeah. And also, I'll totally recognize also my privilege as well as a cisgender East Asian person, although I'm queer in many spaces, especially in tech. There's a overrepresentation of certain Asian demographics as well. And so sometimes I'd be able to hide in certain spaces. But myself, my experience is a little bit different, where I'm at the level of working primarily with executives. And usually I'm, if not the only BIPOC person in the room, the only queer person. And it's they always say it's like you're hitting the ceiling, and sometimes I just have to, at least what keeps me going is a reminder of the work, a reminder of the community, a reminder of the people putting in together the work. And it's not in a way that I'm trying to shield anyone or any community, but sometimes what I try to remind myself is that the politics of the work or the politics of the people who are just struggling to figure shit out themselves, that's not on us to own. That's not on us to prove by any means. And so at least the little quip I'll add is, for the longest time, I had operated in the lens of, I have to try to make everyone happy with this presentation. Every single presentation I was doing, like, I have to figure out how to, do this perfectly. But then you realize that to a certain extent, there's just some people who will not accept it. Like, you can do the best presentation in the world, design the best product, but they just won't be able to see past you. And I feel like I got a second wind when I was able to let some of that go. And, I've acknowledged that, sure, it might reduce some of the work, some of the places that I can enter, but it feels so much better to not have to fight against and try to prove yourself to people who just won't give you the time and attention. And so at least now when I show up in like presentation, I'm just like, this is me, like, take it or leave it, And if you want to leave it, here's the door, like, show yourself out. It's just like, that's been one of the biggest healing thing, is that just not taking the space to do the work on behalf of people. That's for them to own, that's for them to keep, and it's our job to give that work back to them to do. Yeah.
I was just gonna say something that you said, Stephen, was just resonated with me just now when you said that, when basically, I'm reinterpreting, you said that you had really great ideas or what have you, and people weren't able to see past you. Yeah, as somebody who, specializes in design systems, which is very niche very niche, I guess, area of product design. I'm one of the few people in the room who has shipped a design system. And because I'm a Black queer person, I find people don't listen. even if I have done what they're trying to figure out. And design systems work is, even though it's a growing respect, there are a lot of the same problems. There's a system to creating a system, basically. Surprise. And yet, people don't want to hear it, even though you're like, I've figured out the problem. I've already solved that. I can help you. I can also help you keep your job also. Okay, you're not gonna listen. Okay, well, in 6 months we'll see who has a job. So it's not a competition, but basically, with design system, I'm getting into the weeds with design system work, but design systems is an area where you have to prove, like, even more than product design, how to demonstrate value to a company. And if you don't do that, like, very quickly, you're out.
Trevor, for people who may be new to design systems, can you
Yes.
explain a little bit about maybe what that is, what that
Oh my
encompasses?
gosh, you're opening a can of worms because I'm very passionate about design systems. So design systems, what I always say to like people who are not even in tech, I say, well, basically whenever you open an app, it is made up of Legos. And I am basically like the maker of those Legos. I make sure that those Legos are well cared for and well fed, watered and walked. And then I also mentor other designers on how to use a design system. So basically a design system is meant to reduce developer debt as well as design debt. It's meant to make it easier for product feature teams to create products so that, you're not having to reinvent the wheel or redevelop a button when you can just have the same button and just pop it in to your feature. So yes, we love good Legos.
I explained to my partner, who is not in the design discipline in any way, they're an opera singer, what a design system was because they were watching me do it. And I explained it as like a sticker sheet or a stamp set. You've got a sticker sheet to pull from and you can just grab this sticker and throw it where you need it. Obviously it's much more involved than that, but I like using that metaphor.
Yeah.
And I just
want to know. Oh, go ahead. I was actually going to point the mic to you.
Oh, I was just going to say something that Trevor said that resonated with me in it. Basically, I wanted to share this just quickly. I'm not too sure how many of you are coming, or excuse me, I don't know how many of you are actually in tech right now versus trying to break into tech. But what I definitely want to say is that we all have a unique background experience. We all have particular skills that we know how to really leverage. And we have our personalities that really help to guide us as we, go from job to job. And the point that I'm trying to make is continue to understand your worth and what you bring forth to the table, because so many times, and this was kind of going back to, feeling different because you identify a particular way, things of that nature, the conversation that was just being had a little bit earlier.
I also want to say, Nikita, that resonates with me on the feminine side of my experience, is that working with men, cis men, they tend to rush or they want things quicker and they don't want elaboration. And I just want to say, like, that experience to me resonates in sexism and misogyny, which I think is prevalent. So if there are any cis men on this call, just remember to decolonize the way that you're even consuming information that is being brought to the table. Like, make space and keep your ears open and close your mouth and let people share. But I think particularly people in feminine experience, women, and I think especially making sure that you're like, putting things down and hearing what's being said and not just trying to rush through it. So just wanted to plus 5.
And I think too that I remember this when I used to live in LA. I met this wonderful lady We attended the GLAD media training or something of that nature. So, we met up afterwards and she told me, she was like, honey, I like you, so I'm going to tell you this, but you speak too damn slow. And I was like, what? Now, I am from the South. I'm from North Carolina. And I really like to think about what I'm saying, and that's no shade to anybody who, speaks fast, things of that nature. But sometimes I do speak a little slow. And I think that people just simply have to understand that that's a part of that person as well. And that's what I wanted to plus one with what you stated, Micah, because as a gay male, I felt that it was more just the fact that I was soft-spoken. That's kind of what was like, we don't really want to hear what you got to say, or we're really not going to pay attention. We're not going to listen to your ideas, even though we know that they're good. And then we come up with it, or we say we came up with it like 2 to 3 months later. And it's like, I just told girl, okay, whatever. Like, I'm just not even going to do that with y'all today. And definitely as a woman, like I said, when that person told me that, it really bothered me, y'all, because I'm like, I'm 30 something years old. I have a master's degree. I have a plethora of experience, things of that nature. So why would you feel like, didn't I present to you during the interview process? Clearly I'm here. Why do you think I would not be able to do that with others? It's just, it's bothersome. And I just wanted to let you all know that, because I'm pretty sure a lot of us were dealing with that. So just be conscientious of it. Do what it is that you got to do to make your worth and your value known, and let people know that they should not really doubt you and your experiences simply because of whatever they got going on in their head and what they see and project onto you.
I wanna see your podcast. I wanna listen to your podcast.
Exactly.
I love your speaking voice, and I love you're a storyteller, and I can tell that. I think maybe that's from your education background, but I think it's very lovely. And
so much. Thank you so much. Well, thank you. Thank you.
I mean, maybe I'm biased because I'm from Texas, but I mean, I feel like you speak well, very eloquently. So I don't know where the slowness is coming from, but just me.
You never know with these people, Jeff.
Yeah. We are at 25 minutes in, but we have one more topic that we want to chat about, which is going back to joy, going back to our well-being. And so a little bit of pivot and just asking ourselves, amidst all this chaos, all this stuff that we're dealing with, right? How are you all creating space of wellness, well-being, and joy within your work and your day-to-day?
Well, I'm gonna go first. It's real out here. And, it's so stressful. It's like so much going on. Just things in the news, looking at, the crazy orange man doing all that he was doing and getting away with it. But if it was somebody like us, clank, clank. The trigger warning, the murders that's just going on, things of that nature. Seeing what the people in Idaho were trying to do, I think it was Idaho, at the Pride Festival, and just things of that nature. And then to have to, especially when you're working in corporate, really dealing with just like the fast pace of it all, feeling as if you cannot fail. And especially being, I think out of all of us, I have the least amount of experience in, direct UX design because it will be 4 months for me in my first role ever as a UX designer this month. So I'm still, I'm dealing with imposter syndrome, things of that nature that really can really suppress your creativity and really keep you from blooming. Of course, I take walks daily, even if it's just for 15 minutes. I just take a walk. I listen to music that really just kind of allows me to be more free. I eat Twizzlers, the cherry kind, the thick ones, because that just gives me a sense of calm. And of course, I try to take vacations and things of that nature, listening to podcasts, and I read. I know that some of those things may not be of interest to everybody on this call, but definitely find little ways and pockets of joy, even if it is just turning off that computer for 5 to 10 minutes, sitting in silence, and just being happy that you are present, that you are here, and just things of that nature, because it really is hard out here, y'all.
It is. I was going to mention like the microaggressions that you deal with in tech, working in tech. That's how microaggressions are designed. They're designed to like chip away until you just explode and die. Kind of exaggerating, actually being real in Black people's case. But how I find joy is, I'm truly grateful to my job and also my manager at the time for allowing me to do something that I've always wanted to do in my career. And I just had to wait for a pandemic to happen. Basically, working on the road. I love to travel. I'm a solo traveler. I'm basically a mini REI. I have so much gear that doesn't get used because I'm working from a desk. And last year I took a 7-month road trip, and I just relied on my survival instincts to navigate not only a viral pandemic, but also just the normal or the typical things that you face while being on the road. And I will say, it was the happiest time for me. I was very stinky. I missed a shower, but sometimes, but it brought me a lot of joy. It was the happiest time of my life. Since being back and being stationary, I will say what brings me joy is just going to the lake and watching the sunset over the lake. Sometimes just really, it is, I'm such a romantic, so I apologize if I get a little weepy, but it just caps it all off. It just makes me zoom out of all the bullshit that you deal with in corporate, and just makes me reminds me of there's more to life than the technical ins and outs, the political this and that, whatever agenda that people got doesn't have anything to do with what I got going on over here in my life. And I'm just gonna mention it again, but Mariah Carey, "Fly Like a Bird When Things Get Really Hard." Listen to that.
Especially when the chorus comes on too.
Yes.
Yeah, that's my song.
Yes.
That's amazing. Beautiful too. How about you, Micah?
I focus on the things outside of work to bring me joy. I think I'm not sure what the demographic of folks are on this call, like whether you're starting out or whether you've been here for a long time. Two things. Of course, I feel like some of the deepest learnings that I have experienced in the last few years have come from Black women. A good friend of mine, Kathy Dinas, told me a quote that I'll never forget. And it is to expect what you accept. And let me say that one more time, to expect what you accept. And at a certain point, I think in the last year, I stopped accepting things as status quo. I stopped accepting being stationary at my desk. I stopped accepting that my work was my only identity or the only thing that brought value to my life. I'm a parent. I have a 4-year-old. He brings me a lot of joy, a lot of heartache too. He just recently discovered how to Sharpie all over my very expensive couch. But I try to find joy in one-on-one play with him where I put stuff down, or I recently picked up tattooing. The pandemic brought me back full circle from where I started all the way to where I am now. So I've been tattooing friends, being really mindful about a non-apprenticeship tattooing journey that takes me adjacent to design, but not completely away. I've also, since being laid off, have spent a lot of time with my friends. I'm a Taurus. I love my bed. I love my partner. And I don't make my friends a super priority. And they're the things, I'll use this metaphor that my son, there's a book that he reads about filling others' buckets. It's when you do kind things for other people and you fill up this bucket instead of taking away from their bucket. So the things that fill my bucket are really in community and finding joy, specifically QTBIPOC joy, specifically in my community, connecting with people and doing things that are like outrageously queer or make me feel really seen in my gender or make me feel good in my body, that make me get out of my house and connect with people. The ways that I find joy right now are really through community, loved ones, people that are directly connected with me, but also I went to the beach for like 2 times in a row in the last week. Actually, our call last Friday, I was in like a cutoff because I just gotten off of the beach. I'm trying to enjoy, I live in the Bay Area, I never see the water when I'm working 8-12 hours a day in a desk in a like a tiny little hole. So going out and enjoying the places I'm around and really connecting has been very healing. But I will also say doing things like exactly this, what we're doing right now. I crave and seek that like ability to interact directly with community where there are intersections in what we do professionally and our identities. And I just want to say thank you so much, Stephen, for helping facilitate joy for me and hopefully for others too.
Plus
we,
one.
we are
Us
family.
too.
We are
Us too.
family. Exactly. And it looks like also people shared in the chat as well. Joy of birds, joy of cooking, joy of cleaning, mindfulness, wellness, joy in traveling, joy in cuddle breaks with dogs.
I see red tail hawk. I just got a big red tail hawk tattooed on my back. One thing I didn't say was getting tattooed also brings me a lot of joy. Helps me integrate a lot of things. So shout out to the red tail hawk mated pair in the tree.
That's awesome. And yeah, it's just thank you. Like the space, the concept of a space can only be as strong as the people who are in it, you know? And I just want to give like props to all of us. Just really, it's just showing up for tonight. Also props to Treavor, Nikita, Micah. We like literally planned this in like a week. And so we usually do like a brainstorming session like weeks out. We squeezed it in last Friday to show up today, and this is what family does. You know, family shows up for each other like this in the nip of time. And so speaking of, we have about 14 minutes for questions. If anybody in the audience here has anything that they'd love to ask, Keith requests folks' IG in the chat if people want to.
I also wanted to say shout out to Bex and the Queer Design Club, who's also on the call right now. Those are one of those spaces that has been really important to me. So Bex, I know I can see your face, but thank you for also holding adjacent space.
I want to plus one that I'm so grateful to Bex. Like, thank you so much. I had a goal of increasing my public speaking because I'm not very comfortable with that. And you have, thank you. You know what you've done. So thank you very much.
And I just want to say, I think I recently connected with Bex on LinkedIn. So we gonna make that connection that they both have as well. And I just also want to say one last thing. If you can put a little bit of money aside to get a massage, do it. Let somebody work that tension right on up out your body and hopefully right on up out your soul. So that's all I'm gonna say about that.
Well, with that, we are at time. This has been such a healing talk. Thank you for Treavor, Nikita, Micah for showing up in community today. And before kind of we wrap up, just wanted to create space for each of the speakers tonight of just like, what is your one takeaway and one thing you just want to leave the audience with? And then we'll close for this evening.
Okay,
Believe
my
in
doorknob
you.
statement. Yeah, you
Oh.
are enough.
You are enough. Believe in you.
Honey, be a badass. Kick all these people's asses, okay? That's all I gotta say.
Yes.
Yes. Such a
Hey.
high note. What were you going to say, Micah?
I was gonna say ACAB. That's it.
Yes. Mic drop. Boom.
Hey, so nice to see y'all. Nice to meet all of y'all in the call.
Awesome. The space is now officially closed. Hope everyone has a good rest of your evening. And then until next time, stay tuned.